Have you ever wondered why some men cannot simply believe in God? Why they must dissect him, deconstruct him, reimagine him into symbols and shadows before they surrender to anything resembling faith? Carl Jung was that man. He did not kneel at the altar the way ordinary believers do. He stood at the threshold peering into the abyss, wondering if the abyss was, in fact, God staring back. His relationship with Christianity was not gentle. It was dangerous, obsessive, and drenched in the forbidden tension between surrender and control. For Jung, belief was not a passive act of acceptance. It was a labyrinth of confrontation, of wrestling with the divine as Jacob wrestled the angel. And perhaps, in the deepest corners of his psyche, he wasn't looking for God at all. He was looking for the woman who symbolized his anima, the feminine essence of his soul, cloaked in mystery, who forever eluded complete understanding. Some men call this God, some men call this love. For Jung, Christianity wasn't just a religion, it was an inherited mythological structure built into the architecture of the Western psyche. But myths don't stay pure. They evolve, they decay, and sometimes they trap us. Jung saw that clearly. He watched as men aged into spiritual emptiness, repeating dogmas they no longer felt, mouthing prayers that no longer reached their hearts. He knew that beneath every religious confession there lurks a shadow, the part of us that secretly doubts, secretly resents, secretly obsesses over control. Is Carl Jung a Christian, or was he a man haunted by symbols so profound they blurred the line between belief and psychological projection? Imagine a man lying in bed at 3 a.m., staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Not because he fears death, but because he fears meaninglessness. His mind replays every moment he betrayed his own soul by conforming to hollow rituals. He wonders if the woman he lost was not just a person, but a representation of his lost connection to something divine. To love her would have meant risking annihilation. To surrender to her would have required the death of his ego. This is the agony of spiritual men who have spent too long building fortresses around their hearts. They don't pray for salvation, they pray for permission to feel again without collapsing. Jung understood this better than most. He spoke of the self, the archetype of wholeness, the God image buried within the human unconscious. But to meet this self is to dissolve the persona, the mask, the careful projections that keep you socially acceptable but emotionally dead. Jung knew that the man who wants real transformation must pass through a dark night of the soul. He must question not only his faith, but his very identity. And when the questioning begins, obsession often follows. This is where women enter the mythology of the male mind, not as literal beings, but as spiritual catalysts. For men like Jung, the anima is the guide into the unconscious. She is not just lover or muse, she is the threshold keeper, the gate between ordinary consciousness and divine revelation. And sometimes when a man refuses to love her fully in real life, she will haunt his dreams, slipping into his spiritual life disguised as God. Is this why Jung could not answer simply whether he believed in God? Because belief for him was a complex dance between psychological insight and metaphysical longing. His God was not the patriarch in the sky, but the mysterious inner force that calls a man toward wholeness through his desires, through his regrets, through the wounds he cannot heal. And so the question remains, when a man says he believes in God, does he mean he believes in control, or does he mean he's ready to surrender? Most men are not ready to surrender. They would rather obsess than submit. They would rather spiral in thoughts about meaning than actually feel the terror of opening their hearts. But some women, especially the woman who embodies both mystery and distance, will trigger that spiral. She becomes a spiritual problem he cannot solve, a mirror reflecting the parts of himself he has not yet integrated. The feminine is not here to soothe the male ego, she is here to wake it up. And sometimes she is the reason a man will ask himself late at night, not whether he believes in God, but whether he is capable of love that transcends possession. There is a dangerous intersection between desire and divinity, And Jung stood precisely at that crossroads. To the ordinary man, religion is a sanctuary, a place to find comfort, reassurance, answers. But to the man who has glimpsed his own unconscious, belief becomes something far more threatening. It strips away his illusions, exposes his projections, and confronts him with the terrifying reality that much of what he worships is a reflection of his own unmet needs. Jung did not worship God in the way the church taught him. He explored God like a forbidden lover, questioning, doubting, circling around the divine with both reverence and rebellion. For him, belief wasn't about certainty. It was about confronting the chaos within. If a man has spent his life denying his desires, burying his longing for the sacred feminine, he will eventually face a crisis. And for many, that crisis arrives after 40, when ambition no longer seduces and ego achievements feel like dust in the mouth. The external world fails to deliver salvation. The woman he wanted but never claimed becomes a symbol of spiritual exile. His regrets ferment into obsession, not over her body, but over the parts of himself he left unloved. In this way, the question of whether Carl Jung was a Christian dissolves into a deeper inquiry. What happens when a man mistakes religion for repression? When he chains his soul to rigid doctrine, thinking it will save him from his own shadows? Jung warned us that repression breeds neurosis, that what we push into the unconscious does not disappear. It returns, often in distorted forms. The forbidden thought, the secret desire, the unspoken regret, they become ghosts that visit a man in the quiet hours when his defenses are down. Many men will call this guilt. Jung would call it an invitation to integrate, to descend into the underworld of the psyche where the shadow lives, the repressed anger, the hidden eroticism, the unresolved grief. This is the realm where the anima dwells, watching silently, waiting for the man to stop playing God and start listening to the deeper call. And this is why some women become the spiritual haunt of a man's life. Not because of what she did, but because of what she represented, the path he was too afraid to take. She is not just the woman he loved, she is the moment he refused to surrender to emotional truth. And so he builds a theology that allows him to avoid that surrender. He chooses safe beliefs over dangerous intimacy. He chooses spiritual theory over emotional vulnerability. But the unconscious is merciless. It will keep sending him symbols, dreams, nightmares, longing that feels like obsession. He may call it a midlife crisis. Jung would call it individuation, the process of becoming whole, even if it means dismantling everything you thought you believed. To truly awaken, a man must stop asking what doctrine is right. He must ask instead, what part of myself have I abandoned in the name of control? And here the role of the woman becomes pivotal again. She is not the prize at the end of the hero's journey. She is the mirror, the gate, the test, the catalyst. Her silence forces reflection. Her absence triggers meaning-making. Her refusal to be possessed becomes the spiritual crisis he cannot theologize away. This is why men like Jung spend decades circling around the question of God, because they are really circling around the question of the feminine, of surrender, of trust, of the terrifying act of letting go of the ego's grip on the world. So when people ask, was Carl Jung a Christian? They are asking the wrong question. The real question is, did he have the courage to meet his own shadow in the chapel of his mind? Did he see God in the face of his own desire? Did he let the anima teach him what no priest could? You too may have stood at this same precipice. Perhaps there was a time when you thought belief was about rules, about right and wrong, about eternal life after death. But what if belief is really about something more intimate, more dangerous? What if it's about waking up to the parts of yourself you have disowned? The woman who walks away, the love you couldn't claim, the desire you refused to feel, they are not distractions from your spiritual life. They are the entry points. They are the unfinished prayers of your soul. Most women never realize how deeply they live in the fault lines of a man's spiritual life. She thinks she was just the woman he let go, or perhaps the woman he never fully chose. But to the man haunted by his own half-awakened consciousness, she becomes something far more dangerous. She becomes the embodiment of the life he didn't dare live. This is not romance, it's not even regret, it is the soul's silent war between ego and surrender. When Carl Jung spoke of God, he often sounded like he was speaking of the feminine, of mystery, of the vast unknown that both terrifies and seduces the human mind. He once said, "I don't need to believe in God. I know." But what did he mean by know? Not a factual knowledge, not a doctrine, but a direct confrontation with the abyss, a collision with the numinous, the inexplicable, the erotic power of life itself. In this way, the woman a man cannot forget becomes a symbol of his encounter with the divine. She is not his savior, she is the reflection of his unfinished spiritual evolution. Her silence is a sacred wound, her detachment is a mirror to his own emotional poverty, and her absence is not just personal, it is archetypal. It is the echo of every moment he chose safety over soul. Every moment he stayed in the church pew of his comfort zone instead of stepping into the wild forest of self-awareness. If a man asks, "Is Carl Jung a Christian?" he might as well be asking, "Is there a map for this kind of inner chaos?" Because Christianity, like any structured belief system, offers comfort. But Jung's work does not offer comfort. It offers confrontation. The confrontation with the shadow, the confrontation with desire, the confrontation with the terrifying possibility that you are not who you pretend to be. This is why desire is so dangerous for the spiritually repressed man. He thinks he can compartmentalize it, file it away under sin, temptation, or biological impulse. But desire is not just about the body. It is the psyche's way of pointing toward the unlived life. And the woman he obsesses over at night, when his body is tired but his mind refuses to sleep, becomes the symbol of that unlived life. You see, obsession is not the same as love. Obsession is the soul's way of saying, "Wake up." It is not asking for possession. It is asking for transformation. When Jung explored the unconscious, he discovered that the anima, the feminine image in a man's psyche, is not just about romance. It is about the soul's longing for wholeness, for completion, for integration of the emotional body into the intellectual mind. Most men are terrified of this integration because to integrate the anima is to lose control. To open the door to the feminine unconscious is to allow chaos to enter the structured world of the masculine ego. It means feeling things he has buried. It means facing truths he has avoided. It means remembering the woman he loved but never allowed himself to need, not because she was dangerous, but because she awakened a part of him he could not yet hold. This is why some men spiritualize their desire instead of confronting it. They build theologies around their own avoidance. They kneel at altars of denial. They confuse repression with holiness. But the unconscious keeps score. The unfinished dreams remain. And in the quiet hours when his life feels hollow, when the rituals of success no longer anesthetize him, the memory of the woman who got away returns, not as fantasy, but as a symbol of his own spiritual paralysis. Jung knew this. That's why he studied not just religion, but myth, symbol, archetype. He knew that God cannot be confined to a single belief system. God is also the dark feminine, the unexplored desire, the confrontation with mortality, the beauty that refuses to be captured or controlled. So ask yourself, what part of your life have you turned into a religion of avoidance? What woman have you made into a forbidden symbol when really she was just the mirror of your own abandoned soul? The tragedy is not that you lost her. The tragedy is that you lost yourself by refusing to feel the depth of what she awakened in you. But it is not too late. Even now, as you listen to this, there is a part of you that knows, that remembers, that understands the difference between control and connection, the difference between doctrine and desire, the difference between obsession and awakening. Some women become living questions inside the male psyche. They are not wives, not mistresses, not mothers, nor saints. They are something else entirely, enigmatic figures lodged between desire and dread, where neither possession nor rejection resolves the ache. Jung called this the anima projection, but for most men, it feels like madness. When Carl Jung wrestled with the nature of the feminine in his Red Book, he wasn't just meditating on myth, he was confronting his own soul fracture. His Christianity could not save him from this confrontation, nor could logic, science, or clinical detachment. There comes a point in every man's life when he must sit alone with the woman who lives inside his unconscious. She is the one he tried to replace with achievement, with marriage, with distraction, with work, but she doesn't leave. She waits. This is not a woman in the flesh. It is the symbolic feminine, the muse, the shadow lover, the goddess of regret. She appears in his dreams, in his fantasies, and sometimes, if fate is particularly cruel or kind, she shows up in real life as a woman who triggers every dormant longing he thought he'd buried. And when this happens after the age of 40, it's even more dangerous. Because by then, a man has already built his castle of ego. He has invested decades in constructing the story of who he thinks he is. Career, identity, family roles, social masks. He tells himself he is mature now, safe from the chaotic currents of youthful desire. But the psyche has no respect for surface narratives. It operates by ancient, primal laws. It doesn't care about your resume or your reputation. It cares about integration. If you refuse the call to integrate, the psyche sends you obsession instead. Obsession is the soul's revenge on a life unlived, and the woman who becomes the object of that obsession, she is not to blame. She did not cast the spell, he did. He projected his forbidden self onto her, his yearning, his wildness, his hunger for transcendence. She became the face of his spiritual emergency. This is why love, in its unconscious form, turns into fixation. It's not about her, it's about him. About the pieces of his own soul he has locked away in the basement of his mind. About the passions he censored. About the tenderness he buried beneath stoicism. About the creativity he silenced in favor of conformity. Jung knew that most men don't want to face this. It's easier to ask, is Carl Jung a Christian? As if theology could solve the problem of desire. But desire is not solved, it is integrated. When you refuse to integrate desire, it festers. It turns into obsession or bitterness or projection. It turns into late-night scrolling through old messages, wondering why you can't forget her, wondering why you can't sleep, wondering why no achievement tastes sweet enough to erase the hunger she left behind. Some men try to spiritualize this pain, disguising it as moral virtue. They say, I've transcended attachment. They pretend detachment is enlightenment, when in truth, it's just avoidance. But the woman who lingers in his memory is not a punishment. She is an initiation, an invitation to descend into the underworld of the soul, to meet his own darkness, to sit with his unmet longing, not to satisfy it externally, but to listen to what it's really asking for. It is not asking for possession, it is asking for presence, to feel deeply without collapsing, to desire without control, to hold beauty without ownership. Jung wrote that the self, the fully realized soul, cannot be achieved without integrating the shadow. The shadow is not just the dark, aggressive parts of the psyche, it's also the repressed feminine, the tenderness, the vulnerability, the ache to merge with something beyond the self. This is why obsession often feels spiritual, because it is, but in a distorted form. If you've ever found yourself haunted by the thought of her, especially late at night when the distractions fall away, you are not thinking about her alone. You are confronting the gap between who you are and who you could have been. That gap is sacred. It's not there to torture you, it's there to wake you up, to remind you that life is not about perfection, it's about wholeness. And wholeness requires pain. So ask yourself, what have you projected onto her that actually belongs to you? What part of your emotional life did you abandon and now chase in her ghost? When will you stop externalizing your desire and finally own it? The woman who lives in your unfinished dreams is not asking for you to worship her. She is asking for you to remember yourself. Most men don't know what to do with that kind of remembering. They think healing means forgetting her, moving on, erasing the ghost of the woman who appears at 2 a.m. in their restless thoughts. But healing isn't forgetting, it's facing. Facing the fact that she represents something they never gave themselves permission to feel. When Carl Jung became aware of his own consciousness, fully aware, he understood this torment intimately. He called it the confrontation with the unconscious, and it nearly destroyed him. For years, Jung walked the razor's edge between madness and revelation. He spoke to the figures in his mind, he recorded their words, he painted their symbols, he dialogued with Philemon, with Salome, with serpent gods and shadow kings, but perhaps the most dangerous encounter was always with the feminine archetype, the anima. Because the anima is not just a psychological idea, she is a force. A seductive force that pulls a man into longing, into ache, into the realization of his own incompleteness. Most men spend their lives trying to avoid this. They stay busy, they chase success, they surround themselves with noise, but at night when the silence returns, the images resurface. That woman, that memory, that sensation of beauty mixed with loss. And it's not random. The feminine archetype appears when a man is finally ripe for his next transformation, when he has built enough of an ego structure to withstand collapse. This is why it often happens after 40. Before 40, a man is too busy proving himself, chasing goals, defining his masculinity by conquest or status. But after 40, something shifts. His soul starts to whisper louder, his body slows down, his heart remembers things he tried to forget, and then she shows up, in a dream, in a glance, in a song, in a memory so vivid it aches. She is not there to tempt him into scandal. She is there to seduce him back to himself. But here's the dangerous part. If he doesn't understand this, he will try to possess her. He will mistake the symbol for the source. He will try to capture her beauty, control her attention, win her devotion. And when he fails, because he must fail, he spirals into obsession. Regret becomes his religion. Nostalgia becomes his prison. He replays every conversation, every glance, every possibility of what if? What if he had stayed? What if he had chosen differently? What if he had told her how he really felt? But this is the trap. The feminine figure he obsesses over is not the real woman. She is the mirror of his unlived life, the life where he was fully awake, fully present, fully in his heart, not just in his mind. Carl Jung knew this torment well. His Christian upbringing taught him discipline, but it also taught him repression. He had to break through that repression, not to abandon his faith, but to deepen it, to make it real, to root it in the totality of the human experience, not just the parts that looked holy from the outside. Real spirituality is not about perfection, it's about wholeness. And wholeness means confronting desire, confronting longing, confronting the ache for union, not just with another person, but with life itself. Most men don't realize that the woman they can't forget is actually the key to their own spiritual evolution. She is not the obstacle, she is the invitation, but the invitation is not to chase her. It is to integrate the parts of himself she represents, the tenderness, the vulnerability, the capacity to feel without defense. This is why obsession feels like both torture and ecstasy, because it points to a sacred wound, the wound of separation from the self. So the question is not, how do I get over her? The real question is, what part of me did she awaken that I'm still afraid to claim? Until that question is answered, the dreams won't stop, the longing won't fade, the ache will return night after night, asking you to listen deeper, to descend into your own soul, to meet the woman not as an object of desire, but as a guide into your unfinished life. The man who accepts this journey becomes dangerous in the best way, not because he controls others, but because he finally masters himself. He no longer chases the echo of the feminine outside of him. He carries her inside. And this is where the real transformation begins. When a man no longer seeks to possess the woman who haunts his imagination, but instead learns to embody the qualities she represents, he steps into what Jung called individuation, the integration of opposites, the unification of shadow and light, desire and detachment, power and humility. Most men resist this stage because it feels like death, the death of ego, the death of control, the death of the simple transactional view of love as something to win or lose. But underneath that death waits rebirth. Imagine this. You are no longer the man who chases affection like a starving animal. You are no longer the man who trembles when rejected or spirals when ignored. You become the man who loves without grasping, desires without clinging, feels deeply without drowning. Because you finally understand that love is not about possession, it's about reflection. The woman who triggers your deepest obsession is not here to complete you, she's here to reveal you. To show you where you are still fragmented, where you have not yet forgiven yourself, where you are still at war with your own longing. And that is the paradox Jung wrestled with all his life. Is God found in order or in chaos? Is love found in attachment or in freedom? Is the soul found in discipline or in surrender? For Jung, the answer was always both. That is why he embraced symbols, myths, dreams. He knew that the conscious mind alone cannot solve the puzzle of desire and regret. These are not logical experiences. They are alchemical. In alchemy, lead is not simply melted into gold. It is dissolved, broken down, reformed through fire, through time, through darkness. So too with love. So too with obsession. The woman you can't forget, she is the fire. She burns away your defenses. She ignites your fears. She melts the rigid parts of you that thought life was only about success, status, and control. And in that burning, you have a choice. You can resent her for waking you up. Or you can thank her for forcing you to see the truth of who you are and who you are not yet. Most men choose resentment. They armor up, they call her dangerous, manipulative, cold. But the wiser man sees the gift. He lets the obsession turn into introspection. He asks the hardest questions of all. What desire have I denied? What regret have I buried? What part of my soul have I abandoned for the illusion of safety? These questions don't have quick answers. They require silence, reflection, patience. But eventually something changes. The ache softens. The dreams become less about her and more about life itself. The woman becomes less of a symbol of lack and more of a symbol of awakening. This is why Jung spent so much of his later years exploring the divine feminine, not because he wanted to worship women, but because he understood that men need to reconnect with the parts of themselves they project onto women. Tenderness, intuition, emotional vulnerability, spiritual depth. When those qualities are rejected, men become obsessive, possessive, addicted to control. But when those qualities are embraced, men become powerful in a new way. Not the power of domination, but the power of presence. A man who integrates his anima does not chase, he attracts. Not by manipulation, but by magnetism, because he is whole, and wholeness is irresistible. The woman who once lived in his unfinished dreams is no longer a ghost in his mind. She is an energy he carries in his heart, an inner companion, a muse, a reminder of his humanity. He no longer seeks her in the external world because he has found her within. And from this place, love becomes something different. Not a transaction, not a conquest, but a communion. A meeting of souls who have nothing to prove and nothing to hide. This is the path Jung walked, and it is the path every man must walk if he wants to move beyond obsession into true connection. It begins the moment you stop asking, how do I get her back? And start asking, how do I get myself back? The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.